The nominal title of my talk is The Age of Big Data. I can imagine the collective wince as I say those words. Oh no, another screed in the goose-stepping advance of digital technology and the inevitability of the algorithmic imperium. Not today. I just lifted the title as a starting point here. It was a headline on a long piece I wrote more than a year ago for our Sunday Review section, which these days is mainly filled with reported essays on topical subjects. At the time, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland was underway. And there were a number of panels in Davos on this subject called Big Data. A senior editor at the Times noticed and called. He said, write an overview article on it, and added, here's the headline, you figure out the story. In fact, it's been a few years now that I've been trying to figure it out. So today I thought I'd offer a few observations on the story so far, on the phenomenon that now flies under the banner of big data. My wife mockingly calls it big data, big data. She's mimicking Elizabeth Taylor's clipped, vaguely frenetic Southern accent in the classic movie Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Taylor plays Maggie the cat. Her father-in-law, played by Burl Ives, is Big Daddy, the overbearing patriarch of a wealthy family in a small southern town. So what is big data? It's a meme and a marketing term for sure. But substantively, I think of it as two things. One is a bundle of technologies. And the other is the point of view or philosophy about how decisions will be and perhaps should be made in the future. The bundle of technologies, of course, is partly all the old and new sources of data, web pages, browsing habits, sensor signals, social media messages, GPS data, genomic information, and so on. But the other key technology is the clever software to try to make sense of all that data. These are largely the tools taken from the steadily evolving world of artificial intelligence, like machine learning. But big data, its proponents insist, is also shifting the center of gravity in decision-making. Decisions of all kinds, we're told, will be made increasingly based on data and analysis rather than experience and intuition. That is the broader dimension of this big data phenomenon. And it is what David Brooks, my colleague and an op-ed columnist at the Times, meant when he began a recent column with this sentence. If you ask me to describe the rising philosophy of the day, I'd say it is dataism. But let's step back. Those are the two really broad themes of big data before we step back. Advancing technologies and a shift in the mindset of decision making. But let's step back for a little historical perspective, which I think is always kind of useful. The growth of information or data has always been a challenge in its time, and that has often led to the development of new technologies. In the late 19th century, for example, the population of the United States was surging, and the Census Bureau couldn't keep up. The 1880 census took 8 years to complete the counting and tabulations. By 1890, the American population grew to 63 million, the big data of its day. But the 1890 population total was counted within a few weeks, and the answers to all the census questions were sorted and tabulated within a year. The difference? A cutting-edge technology had been deployed for the 1890 census, punched cards, developed by Herman Hollerith. This is Mr. Hollerith and his machine. And those Hollerith cards would be the founding technology of the company that became IBM. In the discussion of big data, there's a lot of focus on the sheer volume of the data and its hockey stick growth path. Gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, yottabytes, yada, yada, yada. But unless you are in the data storage or networking businesses, the volumes themselves aren't so important. There's a lot of water in the ocean too, but you can't drink it. But it is the increasing variety of data, from smartphones to sensors, far more than the volume, that may well open the door to what some people call a revolution in measurement. This technology, it seems, could be the digital equivalent of the telescope or the microscope. Both those made it possible to see and measure things as never before. With the telescope, it was the heavens and new galaxies, and with the microscope, it was the mysteries of life down to the cellular level. This guy here is a man named Antony van Leeuwenhoek, 17th century inventor who invented many microscopes and is considered the father of microbiology. In the big data era, much of what can be measured in fine detail is human behavior, what people are doing in the physical world or looking for online. We've seen early examples of the predictive power of this kind of measurement. The best known examples are probably mining the trends in Google search queries to predict flu outbreaks and changes in the housing market weeks and sometimes months ahead of the official statistics. But there are plenty of other examples. Researchers at the MIT Media Lab, using cell phone GPS tracking and other data, have been able to predict if a person is a good credit risk more accurately than the official FICO scores of creditworthiness. And Place IQ, a smartphone location analysis firm, has determined that the 3 times people are most likely to click on a mobile ad are when they're in a theater, waiting for a movie to start, when they're fishing, and on Sunday mornings. I think it's time on their hands is the common element. And we're just on the cusp of this revolution in measurement. The applications seem all but limitless. You sense, you measure, you communicate, and you can change behavior to improve health and wellness, save energy, prevent crime, manage traffic, conserve water. Startups, big companies, and governments are working on all those. Then all sorts of neat personalized services should be possible. You're walking through an airport, for example, and your smartphone tells you you're walking the wrong way, your gate has been changed, it's gate C46, down there on the hall on the left. A little more intelligence built into all sorts of things to make life easier. Obviously, this kind of measuring and monitoring raises some far-reaching questions about privacy and surveillance. When can companies and governments collect data? And when can they use it? It's an important subject and a good one, but it's also a whole nother discussion and a detailed one about policy and regulation, and not one I'm going to dwell on today. Instead, I wanted to make a couple of observations on big data and the future of decision-making. This technology may well affect everything from how companies are run to how people make decisions in their daily lives. And to frame the issue, 2 famous quotes come to mind. The first is, "You can't manage what you can't measure." For this one, there seemed to be twin claims for attribution. It was either Edwards Deming, the statistician and quality control expert, or Peter Drucker, the management consultant. But of course, who said it first doesn't really matter. It's a mantra in business and has the ring of common sense truth. But there's a lot of truth in the next one too. And this one is from Albert Einstein. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Big data can be seen as the next step in management by measurement. These technologies are tools that are here and will be used. That's a good thing in general. But I'd suggest the enthusiasm for the kind of monitoring and measurement that big data makes possible should be balanced with a dose of the humility found in that Einstein quote. So yes, data-driven decision-making will be the wave of the future. Data, for example, is an antidote to the human tendency to rely too much on a single piece of information or what is familiar, what psychologists call anchoring bias. Data can combat the bias of the familiar and suggest alternative answers that otherwise might be missed. It promises to make decisions of all kinds more scientific. Still, there's a case for caution. Big data is a descendant of Frederick Winslow Taylor's scientific management of a century ago. Taylor's instruments of measurement and recording were the stopwatch, clipboard, and his own eyes. Taylor and his acolytes used these time and motion studies to redesign work for maximum efficiency above all else. Yet eventually, the excesses of that approach became apparent, and even the satirical grist for Charlie Chaplin's modern times. And the enthusiasm for quantitative methods has waxed and waned ever since. The software algorithms of big data that mine vast stores of digital information, looking for patterns, correlations, and anomalies, can trace their heritage partly to Wall Street. Wall Street's computer and math wizards are known as quants. And on Wall Street, we see both the power and the peril of the big data approach. Computerized math models didn't cause the financial crisis, but they certainly played a role. Shortly after the crisis in 2008, I talked to Emmanuel Dermot, one of the original quants at Goldman Sachs. He's now a professor at Columbia University. The trouble, he explained, comes when the predictive models attach crisp, firm numbers to messy, often unpredictable human behavior. Say the probability that a person will repay back a mortgage when the economy sours, or the viral spread of panic in a market crash. The data models had their uses, but as Dermot said, anyone who mistakes the model for the real world is a fool. My favorite, if exaggerated, example of the importance of experience and intuition and not just data and analysis goes back to early 2010. Apple's iPad had been announced, but it was not yet on sale. Steve Jobs was at the New York Times showing off the device to a dozen or so editors and reporters around the company's boardroom table. An editor asked how much market research had gone into the iPad. Those of us who knew Jobs knew pretty much what the answer would be, but it was still fun to hear. None, he replied. It's not the consumer's job to know what they want. The counter-argument is that Steve Jobs was a unique person. I take the point. But I do think there's a more general lesson, and so do others. Sandy Pentland is a computational social scientist at MIT, and he believes that we will all be soon living in what he calls a data-driven society. He's a believer. But as he puts it, big data technology is good at interpolation, but not good at extrapolation. In short, big data fails when a decision requires an intuitive step outside the data sandbox, beyond the range of the data. No company has embraced big data more than IBM. Today, it has 9,000 consultants and 400 mathematicians working on big data projects. And a push for all that came in November 2008 when IBM launched its Smarter Planet campaign. Sam Palmisano was the chief executive, introduced that concept at a speech at the Council on Foreign Relations. His speech was made in the teeth of the financial crisis, when the global economy was in a tailspin. And yet he was pointing to the big opportunity on the horizon for the technologies now called big data. It could have been nothing more than a tone-deaf marketing pitch. But his prediction turned out to be on target. The Smarter Planet initiative proved to be a success and a big business for IBM. 3 years later, when he was stepping aside as chief executive, I asked Palmisano about the decision and its timing. He said he talked to IBM scientists, gathered data on technology and market trends. Then he made the bet, based on data, but also on intuition. It was a judgment call, he explained. If it didn't take judgment, a computer could do it. Well, not yet, it seems. So I see big data as a yes-but story. Yes, this technology is coming. It's unavoidable. But it's a tool, not an answer. A means to improve human decision-making, not replace it. Finally, I'd observe that the big data technology that we're talking about here is an important part of the digital media landscape that so many people here are trying to figure out for themselves, both creatively and commercially. And as Derek Thompson pointed out in the current issue of The Atlantic, the history of affordable news and entertainment in America is, in many respects, a chronicle of advertising's successful shifts from one medium to the next. So I definitely wish you all the best, both professionally and personally. Thank you.